BIARRITZ, France. France's Atlantic coast is famous for its storms, and one is heading straight for G7 leaders gathering in the glitzy beach resort of BIARRITZ. France's President Emmanuel Macron is pushing for the world's economic kingpins to pull back from the brink of an all-out trade war and prevent a major global economic slowdown, but U.S. President Donald Trump is only doubling down on his all-out assault on China and Europe. Far from traveling to France with conciliatory language, senior U.S. officials opened fire on arrival, with one of them accusing Macron of seeking to fracture the G7. The official accused Macron of trying to shift focus away from trade to issues such as climate change, which will play well in France and leave the US looking isolated. That accusation was swiftly denied by the French camp. Macron insisted he was out to prevent a further escalation of trade conflicts. Trade tensions are bad for everyone. We have to try to get a de-escalation, to stabilize things to avoid this trade war that is happening everywhere, the French president said in a video address. What was already expected to be a difficult summit, with export-dependent Germany lurching toward recession and Britain facing the trauma of a no-deal Brexit, has now moved into openly confrontational territory. Time is going to be short because there are so many problems. Angela Merkel, German Chancellor. Late on Friday, Trump announced increased tariffs on all imports of Chinese goods, amid a tit-for-tat escalation with Beijing, and issued an extraordinary order for U.S. companies to disinvest from China and pull their manufacturing back to the United States. He also directly threatened his French counterpart, saying that the G7 host had to drop his unfair digital tax or we'll be taxing their wine like they've never seen before. Trump also made clear that there was a huge gulf on the environmental implications of trade policy between Washington on one side, and Canada, Japan and the EU on the other. Relations between European leaders and right-wing Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro have reached rock bottom over fires raging through the Amazon, and Macron even threatened to kill off a landmark EU trade deal with South America unless Bolsonaro took action to tackle deforestation. The response from across the Atlantic was a cordial display between Trump and Bolsonaro, underpinned by the suggestion that the U.S. and Brazil could seal the trade accord instead. After the two spoke by telephone, Bolsonaro wrote in a tweet that he and Trump shared a mutual desire to launch a great trade negotiation shortly. Trump responded that our future trade prospects are very exciting and our relationship is strong, perhaps stronger than ever before. U.S. President Donald Trump and wife Melania disembark Air Force One in BIARRITZ. Nicholas Kam, AFP. Via Getty Images. Macron's emphasis on the environment was a particular grievance in the U.S. camp. U.S. officials accused the French leader of focusing on issues such as climate change and gender equality to leave Washington in the cold. A senior administration official said France decided months ago not to aim for a final communiqué on which there could be a consensus. This was done to appease and play to Macron's base and domestic audience, the official said. An Élysée official dismissed the charges leveled by the U.S. camp as unfounded. The official said Macron always intended to have trade high on the agenda, but it was also important to discuss other related issues. It's also not either or, it's not either climate or trade, it's both, the official said. So trade was always a part of the agenda, just like inequalities, climate and digital are topics we can't afford to exclude from a summit like this, topics that are as important to public opinion. The official also took issue with the idea that avoiding a final communiqué was a tactic intended to make the U.S. look isolated. It is not true that, because we are avoiding a communiqué, we are not seeking consensus. Communiqués always reflect the lowest common denominator. Instead, we are looking to build a consensus as large as possible, the French official said. Eroding trust. The EU, meanwhile, sounded the alarm about trade wars and a general failure of the G7 to unite around a common worldview. Addressing reporters on Saturday, a few hours ahead of the official opening of the summit, European Council President Donald Tusk said that trade wars will lead to recession, while deals will boost the economy, and stressed that this Sino-American confrontation can be really risky for the whole world, including the EU. The G7 gathering officially gets underway with a dinner on Saturday evening for the leaders of the United States, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, Canada and Japan. Official discussions will start Sunday morning, with trade and the global economy being the first item on the agenda. A slowdown in China is a particular concern for Germany, which is highly dependent on selling machinery and components to the Asian powerhouse, the US. Trade war with China, the threats against the French digital service tax as well as the EU's beef with Brazil won't be the only hot trade issues in BIARRITZ. Trump is also gearing up to roll out tariffs on European products linked to an airplane subsidy dispute and is continually threatening to impose duties on European cars. The global outlook is also souring quickly because of worsening ties between South Korea and Japan, two powerhouses of high-end manufacturing, which has raised fears that global supply chains will be increasingly disrupted in sectors such as chemicals and semiconductors. Trade wars among G7 members will lead to weakening the already eroding trust among us, Donald Tusk, European Council President. If that weren't enough, the World Trade Organization's appellate body, the highest international court that is meant to stop trade returning to an unsupervised law of the jungle, is close to collapse, largely thanks to Trump's refusal to allow the appointment of judges. Time is going to be short because there are so many problems, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said in a video message on Saturday ahead of the summit. Driven by the importance of its auto and engineering industries, Germany has opposed Macron's appeal to block the EU's trade deal with Mercosur, which would open up a lucrative export market to German producers. A German government spokesperson said Friday that failure to conclude the Mercosur agreement would not help to reduce deforestation in Brazil, and added that such threats to Bolsonaro were therefore not the appropriate response. Tusk said Saturday that the EU, of course, stands by the EU-Mercosur agreement, but cautioned that it was hard to imagine a harmonious process of ratification by the European countries as long as the Brazilian government allows for the destruction of the green lungs of planet Earth. Tusk also issued a direct appeal to Trump not to extend his tariff war to the EU. Trade wars among G7 members will lead to weakening the already eroding trust among us, he said, and added, if the US imposes tariffs on France, the EU will respond in kind. We have to be ready for this bad scenario. Related stories on these topics. Let's block ads. Why?